The fire alarm screamed through Sterling Tech's 42nd floor, but Lena Hart didn't move. She had built empires by ignoring distractions, and she wasn't about to let a routine drill interrupt the merger that would reshape Silicon Valley. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as footsteps thundered past her office, as voices called out clearance codes, as the heavy security doors began their automated lockdown sequence. Just 5 more minutes. That's all she needed. She didn't hear the final warning. She didn't see the blast doors seal, and she definitely didn't notice the sprinkler valve she kicked while reaching for her phone. The one that sent her sprawling across the marble floor, her ankles shattering with a sound like breaking ice. Now, lying alone in the vast silence of an empty building, the woman who controlled everything couldn't even stand. For the first time in her life, Lena Hart realized something that stopped her heart cold. No one knew she was missing. If you're curious where this story goes, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The emergency lights cast long shadows across Lena's corner office, turning familiar spaces into something alien and cold. She lay where she had fallen, one hand still gripping her phone, the other pressed against the floor as if she could somehow push herself back into the world she'd just been ripped from. The pain in her ankle had evolved from sharp agony into something deeper, more consuming, a grinding reminder that her body had limits her mind had always refused to acknowledge. "Okay," she whispered to the empty room. "Okay, think." But thinking had never been the problem. Lena Hart had been thinking since she was 6 years old, calculating angles and outcomes while other children played. She'd thought her way through MIT at 19, through her first startup at 23, through the hostile takeover that made her CEO of Sterling Tech at 31. She'd thought her way to the top of an industry that ate women alive, and she'd done it without asking anyone for help, without showing weakness, without ever, not once, needing to be saved. The irony wasn't lost on her. She tried to move again, dragging herself toward the desk where she'd left her laptop bag. If she could just reach it, if she could just get to the emergency radio she knew was standard in every executive office, she could call for help. 3 feet. That's all it was. 3 feet might as well have been 3 miles. Come on, Lena, you've done harder things than this. Except she hadn't. Not really. Every impossible thing she'd accomplished, she'd done from a position of power, with resources at her fingertips and a team of people waiting for her commands. Strip all that away, and what was left? A 36-year-old woman who'd spent so long proving she didn't need anyone that she'd forgotten how to ask. The building settled around her with small creaks and groans, the kind of sounds that buildings make when they think no one is listening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out like a constellation, millions of lights representing millions of lives that were continuing without pause, without awareness that Lena Hart was lying broken on a cold floor. She'd fired her assistant 3 weeks ago. Rebecca had been good, too good actually, which was the problem. The woman had started anticipating Lena's needs before Lena articulated them, had begun offering opinions instead of just executing orders. It had felt like an invasion, like someone trying to crack the fortress Lena had spent her entire life building. So she'd let Rebecca go, citing restructuring, citing efficiency, citing all the corporate euphemisms that really meant you got too close. Now there was no one to notice her absence. No one who would check her calendar and see that she hadn't made her 8 o'clock dinner with the venture capital firm from Singapore. No one who would wonder why her car was still in the garage. No one who would think to look for her because she'd designed her entire life to not be looked for. The pain was getting worse. Lena knew enough about broken bones to recognize that her ankle was seriously damaged. The swelling had already started, turning her joint into something unrecognizable. She needed ice. She needed elevation. She needed medical attention. She needed help. The word tasted bitter. Lena managed to pull herself another 6 inches before the pain forced her to stop. She closed her eyes, breathing through her teeth, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this helpless. It came back with unwelcome clarity. She was 8 years old, locked in the basement of her childhood home because she'd talked back to her mother's boyfriend. She'd screamed until her voice gave out, had pounded on the door until her hands bled. No one came. Not that night. Not the next morning. She'd learned then that rescue was a fairy tale, that the only person you could count on was yourself. So she'd made herself count. She'd made herself invulnerable. She'd made herself so powerful that she'd never have to wait for someone to open a door from the other side. "Lot of good that did you," she muttered. 42 floors below, Miles Carter stood in the parking lot with a clipboard and a growing sense of unease. The evacuation had gone smoothly. Too smoothly, maybe. 417 employees accounted for, all departments cleared, all safety protocols followed to the letter. The fire marshal had already signed off, declaring it a successful drill. People were beginning to drift back toward the entrance, checking phones and complaining about lost productivity. Miles should have been relieved. He was the one who'd spent the last 3 months updating their emergency procedures, who'd fought with department heads about the importance of taking drills seriously, who'd personally walked every floor to map escape routes and identify potential hazards. A clean evacuation was a win. He should be celebrating. Instead, he was counting heads for the 3rd time. "Something wrong, boss?" Tommy Chen, one of his maintenance crew, appeared at Miles's elbow. At 24, Tommy was young enough to still think drills were exciting and old enough to recognize when his supervisor was worried. "The numbers are right," Miles said slowly, "but something feels off." "Off how?" That was the problem. Miles couldn't articulate it. It was just a feeling, the same instinct that had kept him alive during his tours in Afghanistan, the same sixth sense that told him when his 8-year-old daughter was hiding something. The numbers said everyone was safe. His gut said otherwise. "The executive floor," Miles said suddenly. "Did anyone sweep the executive floor?" Tommy consulted his tablet. "Auto clearance from the security system. All biometric sensors showed 0 occupancy before lockdown." "And we're trusting the sensors?" "Boss, the system's been upgraded twice since you started. It's foolproof." Miles had been a Marine long enough to know that nothing was foolproof. He scanned the crowd, looking for the faces that belonged on the 42nd floor. Gerald from accounting, there. Sarah from legal, there. Marcus from operations, there. All the people who worked in the executive suite all accounted for. Except, "Has anyone seen Lena Hart?" Tommy blinked. "The CEO? Dude, she never participates in drills. She's probably already gone for the day. Her car's still here." "So? She uses drivers. She's got like 3 different car services on speed dial." Miles knew that was probably true. He'd worked at Sterling Tech for 6 years, had been a supervisor for the last 2, and he could count on one hand the number of times he'd actually seen Lena Hart. She existed in a different orbit, the kind of person who appeared in company-wide emails and quarterly earnings calls, but rarely walked the same floors as the people who kept the building running. Still, the unease wouldn't go away. "I'm going to check," Miles said. "Check what?" "Boss, the building's in lockdown. You can't just—" But Miles was already moving toward the security station. He'd spent 6 years learning every system in this building, had cultivated relationships with every guard and every janitor because that's what good supervisors did. He knew which protocols could be bent and which ones would get you fired. More importantly, he knew which guards owed him favors. "Ray," he said, approaching the security desk, "I need you to give me 5 minutes in the building." Ray Martinez looked up from his monitors, his expression already skeptical. "Miles, man, you know I can't do that. Lockdown protocols. I know the protocols. I wrote half of them. I just need to check something." "Check what?" "CEO's office. I've got a bad feeling." Ray's skepticism deepened. "A bad feeling? That's what you're going with? You want me to violate lockdown because you've got a bad feeling?" Miles leaned against the desk. "Remember last January? When your kid was sick and you needed to leave early, but you'd already used all your sick days? Remember who covered your shifts? Remember who made sure the schedules got adjusted so you wouldn't lose pay? That's low, man. That's practical. 5 minutes, Ray. That's all I'm asking." The guard stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "If this comes back on me, it won't. I'll take full responsibility." "Yeah, you say that now." But Ray was already typing into his terminal, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "I'm giving you a 10-minute window. 1 sweep, straight to the executive floor and back. You find anything, you radio immediately. You don't find anything, you get your ass back here, and we never talk about this again." "Deal." Ray handed over a master keycard. "And Miles, be careful. System's got some glitches after the upgrade. I've been getting phantom readings all week." Miles took the card and headed for the building entrance. Behind him, he heard Tommy calling out, asking what the hell he thought he was doing, but Miles didn't stop. He couldn't. The feeling in his gut had crystallized into certainty. Someone was still in that building. Someone needed help. The lobby was eerily quiet, emergency lights casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Miles's footsteps echoed on the marble floor as he moved toward the elevator bank. The lockdown had frozen everything. Elevators offline, security doors sealed, all automated systems in standby mode. He'd have to use the stairs. 42 floors. In full gear, carrying 50 pounds of equipment, Miles had done worse. But that was 10 years ago, before his knees started reminding him he wasn't 25 anymore. He started climbing. By the 10th floor, his breathing had found a rhythm. By the 20th, his legs were burning. By the 30th, he was questioning his judgment. Maybe Tommy was right. Maybe he was chasing nothing. Maybe Lena Hart was at some restaurant downtown, laughing over wine with people who existed in her stratosphere, completely unaware that the maintenance supervisor was having a minor panic attack on her behalf. But he kept climbing. The door to the 42nd floor was sealed, but the master keycard overrode the lockdown. Miles pushed through into a space that looked like it belonged in a design magazine, all glass and steel and carefully curated art. The emergency lights were dimmer here, as if even the backup systems knew this floor was meant to impress. "Hello?" His voice sounded too loud in the silence. "Anyone here?" Nothing. Maybe he really was chasing ghosts. He moved down the hallway, checking offices one by one. Conference rooms, empty. Private offices, empty. Break room, empty. With each empty space, his certainty faltered. This was stupid. He was risking his job for a hunch, and it was becoming increasingly clear that his hunch was wrong. Then he heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it. A sharp intake of breath, quickly suppressed. "Hello?" He moved faster now, following the sound. "Is someone there?" Another sound, clearer this time. Someone trying not to make noise, trying not to be heard, and failing. The corner office had double doors, both sealed. Miles used the keycard and pushed through into a space that was less office and more sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that probably cost more than his annual salary, furniture that looked like it had never been sat in, and in the middle of it all, lying on the floor like something broken and discarded, was Lena Hart. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment neither of them moved. Miles had seen her before, of course, in company photos, in passing at company events. But those glimpses had been curated, controlled. This was different. Her expensive suit was torn at the knee. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose. Her face was pale with pain, and something else. Something that looked like shame. "Well," she said, her voice hoarse. "This is embarrassing." Miles crossed the room in 4 strides, his training kicking in automatically. "Don't move. Where are you hurt?" "My ankle. I fell when the lockdown started. I think it's broken." He knelt beside her, his hands gentle as he assessed the injury. The swelling was significant, the discoloration already spreading. Definitely broken, possibly in multiple places. She needed a hospital, needed it hours ago. "Okay, he said, keeping his voice calm and level. "Okay, we're going to get you out of here. Can you put any weight on it?" "I haven't been able to stand for the last 2 hours." 2 hours. She'd been lying here alone for 2 hours. The thought made something twist in Miles's chest. Anger at the system that had failed, at the sensors that had missed her, at the protocols that had prioritized efficiency over people. "I'm going to call for medical," he said, reaching for his radio. No signal. Lena gestured weakly at her phone. "I already tried. The lockdown blocks everything except emergency frequencies, and apparently those don't work from inside a sealed building." Brilliant design, right? There was a brittleness to her voice that Miles recognized. He'd heard it in combat, in soldiers who were using sarcasm to hold back panic. She was barely holding it together. "Then we do this the old-fashioned way," he said. "I'm going to carry you." "You can't carry me 42 floors." "Watch me." "I'm serious. You'll hurt yourself. Just go get help and come back." Miles met her eyes. "I'm not leaving you here alone." Something shifted in her expression, surprise maybe, or disbelief, as if the concept of someone staying was foreign to her. And maybe it was. Looking around this office, at the deliberate isolation of it, Miles wondered when was the last time someone had chosen to stay with Lena Hart instead of leaving her behind. "I outweigh you by at least 30 pounds, she said, still arguing. "I carried wounded Marines through worse. You'll be fine. I'm your boss's boss's boss. And right now, you're someone who needs help. So you can argue with me, or you can let me do my job." He positioned himself beside her, already calculating the best way to lift without causing more damage to her ankle. "What's it going to be?" Lena stared at him for a long moment. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. "Okay." Miles slipped one arm under her knees, careful to support the injured leg, and another around her back. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "Everything already hurts." He lifted in one smooth motion, and Lena gasped, her hand automatically gripping his shoulder. She was lighter than he'd expected, or maybe he was running on adrenaline. Either way, he had her secure. "You okay?" he asked. Define okay. But there was less edge in her voice now, more exhaustion. "What's your name?" "Miles. Miles Carter." "Well, Miles Carter, I hope you know what you're doing. That makes two of us." He carried her out of the office, into the hallway, toward the stairwell, 42 floors down. With every step, he could feel her breathing, could feel the tension in her body as she tried not to show how much pain she was in. She didn't make a sound, didn't complain, just held on. "So," Miles said, because silence felt worse. "Come here often?" The laugh that escaped her was more surprise than humor. "Are you seriously making jokes right now? Would you prefer stoic silence? Because I can do stoic silence. I'm actually really good at stoic silence." "No, it's fine. Thank you. For the jokes or the rescue?" "Both. Neither. I don't know." She shifted in his arms, trying to find a position that didn't make her ankle scream. "I'm not very good at this." "At what?" "Being rescued." They'd reached the stairwell. Miles started down, taking each step carefully. "Yeah, well, I'm not very good at rescuing CEOs, so we're even." "Is that what you do? Rescue people?" "I maintain buildings. Keep the lights on. Make sure the elevators work. Convince the coffee machines to stop trying to achieve sentience. Occasionally, I rescue CEOs who refuse to evacuate during fire drills." "I didn't refuse. I just lost track of time." "Uh-huh. I did. I was working on something important. More important than not dying in a building fire." Lena didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter. "There wasn't actually a fire, was there?" "No, just a drill." "Then I didn't almost die. I just made a very stupid choice that resulted in a broken ankle and a humiliating rescue by someone whose name I didn't even know until 5 minutes ago." Miles glanced down at her. In the dim emergency lighting, her face was drawn, exhausted. But there was something else there too, a kind of raw honesty that felt like she'd surprised herself by saying it out loud. "For what it's worth," he said, "I don't think you're stupid. Stubborn, maybe. Workaholic, definitely, but not stupid. You don't even know me. I know you chose work over safety. I know you've designed your life so that no one notices when you're missing. I know you're lying here in my arms right now trying to figure out how to maintain control of a situation where you have none." He paused on a landing to adjust his grip. "How am I doing?" "Alarmingly accurate. I've got a good read on people. Comes with the job. I thought you maintained buildings." "Buildings are filled with people. You learn to read them or you don't last long." They descended in silence for a while, the only sound their breathing and Miles's footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. 20 floors down, 22 more to go. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said suddenly. "Sure." "Why did you come looking for me?" Miles considered the question. "Honestly, I don't know. Number said everyone was out. System said the building was clear. But something felt wrong." "And you always trust your feelings?" "I trust them more than I trust computers." That's not very logical." "No, but it's kept me alive this long." Another few floors in silence, then, "Miles?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for trusting your feelings." Something in her voice made Miles look down. She wasn't crying. He suspected Lena Hart didn't cry. Not where anyone could see, but her eyes were bright, and there was a vulnerability there that felt like a gift, like she was letting him see something she usually kept locked away. "You're welcome," he said simply. They made it to the ground floor as Miles's arms were starting to shake. He pushed through the stairwell door into the lobby where Ray was waiting, radio already in hand. "Holy—" Ray stopped mid-curse. "Is that—" "Get medical up here," Miles said. "Now." The next 30 minutes blurred together. Paramedics, questions, Lena being loaded onto a stretcher with professional efficiency. Miles gave his statement to security, to the fire marshal, to anyone who asked. His arms ached. His knees hurt. He wanted nothing more than to go home, hug his daughter, and pretend this night had never happened. But as the ambulance doors were closing, Lena caught his eye. She didn't say anything, just looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. Then the door shut and she was gone, carried away into the night by strangers whose job was to heal, but not to know. Miles stood in the parking lot and watched the ambulance lights disappear. Around him, people were returning to the building, the excitement over, the drama concluded. Back to normal. Back to their lives. "Boss?" Tommy appeared beside him. "That was insane." "Yeah. You saved her life." "I carried her down some stairs." "You saved the CEO's life. You're going to get a promotion, maybe a raise, maybe both." Miles shook his head. "I just did what needed to be done." He turned to go, but something made him pause. He looked back at the building, up to where the 42nd floor glowed dimly in the darkness. Somewhere up there was an office that had almost become a tomb, a space designed for power that had become a cage. He wondered if Lena Hart would ever sit in that office again. He wondered if she'd remember this night, or if she'd file it away as an embarrassing incident to never speak of again. He wondered if he'd just had a brief intersection with someone who existed in a completely different world, a world he'd never touch again. Probably, he thought. That's how these things usually worked. But as he walked to his truck, as he drove home through the quiet streets, as he climbed the stairs to his apartment where his daughter was sleeping and his life was waiting, Miles couldn't shake the image of Lena Hart lying on that floor, alone and broken, trying so hard not to need anyone. He'd seen a lot of pain in his life. Combat, divorce, single parenthood. He knew what suffering looked like. But there was something about Lena's loneliness that haunted him. It wasn't the loneliness of someone who'd been abandoned. It was the loneliness of someone who'd built walls so high that even she couldn't see over them anymore. Miles let himself into the apartment quietly. Emma was asleep in her room, her nightlight casting constellation patterns on the ceiling. He stood in the doorway and watched her breathe, this small person who depended on him completely, who trusted that he would always come home, who knew without question that she was loved. When had Lena Hart last felt that way? When had she last trusted someone to come back for her? Maybe never, Miles thought. And wasn't that the loneliest thing of all? He went to bed but didn't sleep. Instead, he stared at the ceiling and thought about a woman in a hospital somewhere, probably still trying to maintain control, still trying not to need anyone, still convinced that the only person she could count on was herself. And he thought, someone should tell her she's wrong, but that someone wouldn't be him. Their worlds had touched for one brief moment, and now they'd drift apart again. That's just how life worked. Still, as he finally drifted towards sleep, Miles made a promise to himself. The next time he felt that instinct, that certainty that something was wrong, he wouldn't doubt it. He'd trust it. Because sometimes the difference between life and death, between rescue and abandonment, was nothing more than someone who was willing to climb 42 flights of stairs on nothing but a hunch. Someone who refused to leave anyone behind, even when the whole world said they were already gone. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and failure. Lena had been awake for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling tiles and cataloging everything that had gone wrong. The surgery had been successful. 2 pins, 1 plate, 6 weeks minimum before she could put full weight on her ankle. The doctor had been cheerful about it, as if being temporarily crippled was some kind of adventure. She'd already fired off 17 emails from her phone, rescheduled 4 critical meetings, and assured her board of directors that this was a minor setback that wouldn't impact operations. No one needed to know she'd spent 2 hours lying on her office floor like discarded furniture. No one needed to know she'd been carried down 42 flights of stairs by a maintenance supervisor whose first name she barely remembered. Miles. His name was Miles, The memory made her uncomfortable, not because of the rescue itself, but because of how she'd felt during it. The relief when he'd appeared, the strange security of being held, the way his voice had cut through her panic with those ridiculous jokes. She'd spent 36 years proving she didn't need anyone, and then in one night, everything she'd built had crumbled. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lena expected a nurse, maybe her lawyer with the paperwork she'd requested. Instead, Miles Carter walked in carrying a paper bag and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You're awake," he said, stating the obvious in a way that suggested he hadn't actually expected to find her conscious. "I'm always awake." Lena tried to sit up straighter, winced, and settled for looking as dignified as possible while wearing a hospital gown. "What are you doing here?" "Checking on you." He set the bag on the bedside table. "Brought you something that isn't hospital food. Tommy said you've been here since last night without eating." "Who's Tommy?" "Guy on my crew. His sister works in radiology. Apparently hospital gossip travels fast." Lena stared at him. "You brought me food. Is that weird? Should I not have brought you food? She stopped, recalibrated. "Thank you. That's very kind." Miles pulled up a chair, and Lena noticed he moved with the careful economy of someone whose body had taken damage and learned to compensate. "How's the ankle?" "Surgically repaired. I'll be back to full function in 6 weeks." "That's not what I asked." The directness caught her off guard. Most people accepted her corporate answers, her carefully constructed responses that revealed nothing. Miles was looking at her like he could see straight through the performance. "It hurts," she admitted. "A lot." "Yeah, broken bones tend to do that." He leaned back in the chair. "You taking the pain medication they prescribed?" "It makes me foggy. I have work to do." "You have recovery to do. Work can wait." Lena laughed, sharp and bitter. "Work never waits. That's the whole point." "The whole point of what?" "Everything. Building something that matters, creating value, staying ahead of—" She stopped herself. Why was she explaining this to him? "You wouldn't understand. Try me." There was something infuriating about his calm certainty, the way he sat there like he had all the time in the world. Lena had spent her entire life around people who understood urgency, who moved at her speed. This man seemed content to just exist in the moment, waiting. "I built Sterling Tech from nothing," she said finally. "I was 23 years old with an idea and $5,000 in savings. Everyone said I'd fail. Every investor, every advisor, every person who thought they knew better. So I proved them wrong. I worked 100-hour weeks. I slept in my office. I sacrificed everything, relationships, health, any semblance of a normal life. And I won." "Won what?" The question stopped her cold. "What?" "You said you won. What did you win?" Lena gestured at herself, at the hospital room, at everything. "This, success, power, a company worth $3 billion. And it was worth it? Of course it was worth it." Miles nodded slowly. "Okay. You don't believe me." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. It's written all over your face." He smiled, just slightly. "My ex-wife used to say I had a terrible poker face." She was right. The mention of an ex-wife shifted something. Lena found herself curious despite herself. "How long were you married?" 7 years. Divorced for 4 now. What happened?" "I came back from Afghanistan different than I left." She tried to wait it out, tried to understand, but eventually she realized she'd married one person and was living with someone else. Can't really blame her for that. The honesty was disarming. Lena was used to people who carefully curated their personal narratives, who presented only the successful, polished versions of their lives. Miles spoke about his divorce the way someone might discuss the weather, factual, without self-pity, accepting. "Do you have children?" she asked. "A daughter?" "Emma, she's 8. His entire face changed when he said her name, softening in a way that made him look younger. "She lives with me full-time. Her mother's remarried, moved to Portland. We do summers and holidays." "That must be difficult." "It's life. You adapt." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. A small girl with wild, curly hair, and her father's eyes grinned at the camera, missing one front tooth. "She's the reason I took the job at Sterling Tech. Better hours than construction, better benefits. I wanted to be home for dinner, help with homework, be the kind of dad who shows up. Lena looked at the photo and felt something twist in her chest. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. Miles put the phone away. So what about you? Any family? No? Parents? Dead. The word came out harsher than she intended. My mother passed away when I was 12. I never knew my father. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But Miles was watching her with that same unsettling perception, like he could see the parts of her story she wasn't telling. No siblings? Aunts? Uncles? No one who matters. That's different than no one at all. Lena felt her defenses rising. Why are you here, Miles? Really? We don't know each other. I'm just someone you carried down some stairs. You're someone who was alone and hurt and needed help, he said simply. And now I'm checking to make sure you're okay. That's it. There's no agenda. Everyone has an agenda. Maybe in your world. In mine, sometimes people just do things because they're the right thing to do. She wanted to argue with him, wanted to point out all the ways that worldview was naive and simplistic, but she was tired and her ankle hurt, and there was something almost peaceful about sitting here with someone who didn't want anything from her except maybe honest conversation. The food, she said, gesturing at the bag. What is it? Sandwiches from the deli on 5th, turkey and Swiss, no mayo, extra mustard. Completely guessed on your preferences, so if I got it wrong, just tell me and I'll... It's perfect. Lena didn't know if it was perfect. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a sandwich from a deli, but Miles had brought it, and that gesture alone made it somehow matter. They sat in comfortable silence while she ate. The sandwich was good, better than good actually. Real ingredients, bread that hadn't been mass-produced, the kind of simple food she'd forgotten existed outside of artisanal restaurants that charged $30 for nostalgia. Can I ask you something? Lena said after a while. Sure. Last night when you found me. How did you know? The system said the building was empty. Everyone else believed it. Why didn't you? Miles considered the question. I've learned to trust my instincts, spent too many years in places where your instincts kept you alive. If something feels wrong, I pay attention. That must make normal life complicated. Sometimes, Emma says I'm paranoid. I prefer appropriately cautious. What else does Emma say about you? He smiled. That I make terrible pancakes, that I worry too much, and that I give the best hugs in the world. 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Lena found herself smiling back. The pancakes are really that bad? They're catastrophically bad, like weapons-grade bad. I've tried following recipes, watching videos, everything. They still come out like rubber frisbees. Maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just not meant to make pancakes. He shrugged. We go to IHOP on weekends instead. Emma's decided that's our tradition. There was something about the way he talked about his daughter, the casual intimacy of it, the way he'd built his entire life around making sure she felt loved and safe. Lena had never had that. Her mother had been distant at best, actively neglectful at worst. The parade of boyfriends who'd cycled through their apartment had ranged from indifferent to cruel. Love had always felt conditional, something you earned by being perfect or lost by being human. You're a good father, she said quietly. I try. Most days I feel like I'm making it up as I go. Isn't that what everyone does? Probably. But some people make it look easier. A nurse appeared in the doorway, medical chart in hand. Miss Hart, I need to check your vitals. Miles stood immediately. I should go. Let you rest. You don't have to... Lena stopped herself. She'd been about to say he didn't have to leave, which was absurd. She barely knew this man. She didn't need company. She didn't need anything, except she'd enjoyed the last hour more than any interaction she could remember in months. I'll check on you tomorrow, Miles said, if that's okay. You really don't have to do that. I know, but I will anyway. He paused at the door. Get some rest, Lena, and take the pain medication. Being tough is admirable. Being in unnecessary pain is just stubborn. Then he was gone, and Lena was left alone with the nurse and the beeping monitors and the strange, uncomfortable feeling that something in her carefully controlled world had just shifted. The next 3 days followed a pattern. Lena would wake up determined to maintain her normal schedule from the hospital bed. She'd work through emails, take conference calls, review reports. And every afternoon, Miles would appear with food and conversation, refusing to be deterred by her insistence that he didn't need to keep visiting. "Don't you have a job?" she asked on the third day. "I do. I also have a lunch break. This is an hour's drive from Sterling Tech, so I eat in my truck on the way back. Problem solved." Lena didn't know what to do with him. Miles Carter didn't fit into any category she understood. He wasn't trying to network or leverage their connection. He didn't want anything from her. He just kept showing up, bringing terrible coffee and surprisingly good sandwiches, asking questions that made her think about things she usually avoided. "Tell me about Emma," she said one afternoon, partly because she was curious and partly because it was safer than talking about herself. Miles pulled out his phone without hesitation, scrolling through photos. "This is from her school play last month. She was a tree. She took it very seriously, studied how trees moved, practiced her tree stance. Opening night, she stood so still that the director thought she'd fallen asleep standing up." The photo showed Emma in a brown costume covered in construction paper leaves, her face frozen in intense concentration. "She's committed," Lena said. "She's stubborn as hell. Wonder where she gets that from." Miles grinned. "This one's from her birthday. We went to the science museum. She spent 3 hours in the physics exhibit, building contraptions and explaining potential energy to anyone who'd listen." More photos. Emma blowing out candles, Emma covered in paint, Emma asleep on the couch with a book still open on her chest. Every image radiated love. Not the performed kind that people posted on social media, but the real, messy, daily kind that came from actually being present. "She looks happy," Lena said. "Most days, yeah. Some days are harder. She still misses her mom, still asks why we can't all live together. I do my best, but I can't be two parents. You're doing better than two of some parents I've known." Miles looked at her carefully. "Bad childhood?" "Understatement." "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Fair enough." He put his phone away. "But if you ever do, I'm a pretty good listener." Lena found herself wanting to tell him, which was alarming. She'd never talked about her childhood, not to therapists or friends or anyone. It was locked away, filed under irrelevant history, in the same way she filed away failed product launches or abandoned strategies. But something about Miles made her want to open those files. "My mother's boyfriend used to lock me in the basement," she heard herself say, "when I misbehaved, which was often, apparently." Miles went very still. "How old were you?" 6 to 12. Different boyfriends, same pattern. She'd let them do it. Said I needed to learn respect. That's abuse. That's survival. She did what she had to do to keep men around. I was just in the way. You were a child. I was a problem." Lena looked down at her hands, surprised to find them shaking slightly. "The last time it happened, I was in there for 2 days. I stopped screaming after the first few hours. Just sat in the dark and promised myself that when I got out, I'd never be powerless again." "Lena." 3 weeks later, my mother had a heart attack. Died on the kitchen floor while her boyfriend was passed out drunk in the bedroom. I went into foster care, aged out at 18 with nothing, so I built something, and I made sure no one could ever lock me away again. The silence stretched between them. Lena waited for pity, for the awkward reassurances people usually offered when confronted with trauma. Instead, Miles just nodded slowly. "Makes sense," he said. "What does?" "Why you stayed in your office during the drill. Why you've built your whole life around control. You're still trying to prove you're not that kid in the basement." The observation hit harder than Lena expected. That's very psychologically astute for a maintenance supervisor. "I've had a lot of therapy. Post-deployment, post-divorce, you pick up patterns." He leaned forward. "Can I tell you something? Do I have a choice?" "You always have a choice. That's the whole point." He waited until she nodded. "You survived something terrible. You built something incredible. But you're still in a cage, Lena. It's just a cage you built yourself. That's not... You work 100-hour weeks in an office you can't leave. You've designed your life so no one gets close enough to matter. You lie on a floor for 2 hours rather than ask for help because asking for help means admitting you need someone. That's not freedom. That's just a different kind of locked door." Lena felt anger flare, hot and defensive. "You don't know me." "I know what I see, and I see someone who's so afraid of being powerless that she's made herself alone." "I'm not alone. I have employees, colleagues, People who work for you aren't the same as people who know you. When was the last time you had a conversation that wasn't about business? When was the last time someone asked how you were doing and you told them the truth? When was the last time you minded your own business? Miles smiled sadly. Probably never. It's a character flaw. They sat in tense silence. Lena wanted him to leave, wanted to retreat back into the safe numbness of work and control. But part of her, the part that had enjoyed these visits, that had started looking forward to them, didn't want him to go. I don't know how to do it differently, she said finally, the words barely above a whisper. Do what differently? Any of it. Being close to people, trusting them. I don't have the manual for that. Nobody does. You just start small. Like what? Like this. Talking to me. Letting me visit. Eating sandwiches and telling the truth occasionally. It's not complicated. Everything's complicated. Only if you make it that way. Miles checked his watch. I need to pick up Emma from school, but I'll be back tomorrow. You really don't. I know. I'm coming anyway. He left, and Lena sat in the empty room feeling like something had cracked open inside her. The walls she'd spent decades building were still there, but Miles Carter had found the hairline fractures, the places where light could get through. She picked up her phone, intending to dive back into work. Instead, she found herself looking at the photos Miles had shown her. Emma as a tree. Emma at her birthday party. Emma loved and safe and certain that her father would always come home. What would it be like to be that certain about anything? The next morning, Lena was cleared for discharge. She'd already arranged for a car service, for her apartment to be set up for wheelchair access, for a private nurse to handle her recovery. Everything managed, everything controlled. Miles arrived as she was signing the final paperwork. You're leaving, he said. Excellent observational skills. Smart ass. But he was smiling. Need help getting home? I have arrangements. Of course you do. He handed her a piece of paper with a phone number written on it. In case you need anything, or just want to talk. Lena looked at the number. Why are you doing this? Doing what? All of it. The visits, the food, the conversations. What do you want from me? Miles considered the question seriously. Nothing. I just think you deserve to have someone who shows up. No agenda, no expectations, just someone who gives a damn. People don't do that. Some people do. You've just spent so long avoiding them that you forgot they exist. The car service arrived before Lena could respond. Miles helped her into the wheelchair. She hated it, hated the dependence, but her ankle wasn't ready for crutches yet, and walked with her to the elevator. Take care of yourself, Lena. I always do. I mean, really take care of yourself. Rest, heal, let yourself be human for 5 minutes. I'll take it under advisement. She expected him to leave. Instead, he crouched down so they were eye level. I'm serious, you almost died in that building. Maybe use this recovery time to think about why you were there alone in the first place. Then he stood and walked away. And Lena was left sitting in a hospital wheelchair holding a piece of paper with a phone number she'd probably never use, feeling more unsettled than she'd felt in years. The next 2 weeks were torture. Lena tried to work from home, but concentration proved impossible. Her ankle throbbed despite the medication. Her apartment felt too quiet. And worst of all, she kept thinking about Miles Carter and his terrible coffee and his questions that cracked through her defenses like armor-piercing rounds. She didn't call. She told herself she was too busy, too focused on recovery, too invested in maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. The truth was simpler and more frightening. She didn't know how to be friends with someone. She didn't know how to exist in a relationship that wasn't transactional. On day 16, her doorbell rang. Lena maneuvered her wheelchair to the entrance and checked the camera. Miles stood in the hallway holding a grocery bag and looking characteristically patient. She almost didn't answer. Then she thought about what he'd said about cages and locked doors and people too afraid to be powerless. She opened the door. You didn't call, Miles said. I've been busy. You've been hiding. That's presumptuous. That's accurate. He held up the bag. I brought supplies. Can I come in? Lena rolled backward, and Miles entered her apartment. She watched him take in the space, all minimalist design and expensive furniture, everything chosen for aesthetic rather than comfort. It looked like a hotel room. It looked like no one actually lived there. Nice place, Miles said, which they both knew was polite rather than honest. What's in the bag? Pancake ingredients. I figured if I'm going to keep making terrible pancakes, I should at least subject someone else to them. Misery loves company and all that. You're planning to cook in my kitchen? Unless you have objections. Lena had about 17 objections, starting with the invasion of her space and ending with the sheer absurdity of Miles Carter making pancakes in her designer kitchen. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'll watch." And so she sat at her kitchen island, the one she'd never actually used for cooking, and watched Miles Carter systematically destroy pancake batter while explaining his theory that pancakes were sentient beings who'd decided to hate him specifically. "See, that's the problem," he said, flipping a pancake that landed half on the pan and half on the stove. "They know what I'm trying to do and they're actively resisting. Or you're adding too much flour. I'm following the recipe exactly. Recipes are guidelines, not commandments." Spoken like someone who's never made catastrophic pancakes. Lena found herself laughing, actually laughing, not the polite corporate chuckle she deployed at business dinners. "Let me try." "You're in a wheelchair. I have arms. Push me closer." Miles maneuvered her chair next to the stove, and Lena took over. The batter was indeed too thick, overworked into rubber. She adjusted the ratio, added milk, stirred gently instead of aggressively. The next pancake came out golden and fluffy. "How did you—" Miles stared at the perfect pancake. "That's witchcraft. That's basic cooking. You're a CEO who knows how to make pancakes. I'm a human being who can follow instructions without overthinking them." She flipped another pancake. Unlike some people. They worked together in surprisingly easy silence. Lena cooking and Miles playing sous chef, fetching ingredients and washing dishes, and keeping up a running commentary that made her smile despite herself. When they finally sat down to eat, Lena couldn't remember the last time food had tasted this good. Not because of the quality, but because of the company. "Thank you," Miles said quietly. "For what? Teaching you basic cooking skills?" "For letting me in. I know that's hard for you." Lena looked down at her plate. "Why do you keep coming back? Really?" "Because you remind me of someone." "Who?" "Me, about 5 years ago." Miles set down his fork. "After I came back from Afghanistan, I was a mess. PTSD, depression, the whole package. I pushed everyone away, told myself I was protecting them, that I was handling it. Really, I was just terrified of being vulnerable. It took hitting absolute rock bottom before I accepted help." "What changed?" "Emma. She was 3 years old asking why Daddy was always angry. I realized I had a choice. Keep pretending I was fine and watch my life fall apart, or admit I was broken and start putting the pieces back together." He met her eyes. "You're not broken, Lena, but you're alone. And that's a choice too." The words sat heavy in the space between them. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, wanted to retreat back into the safety of control and distance. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Will you come back? Do you want me to?" "Yes." Miles smiled. "Then I'll come back." And he did. 2 days later, then 4 days after that. He brought Emma once, and Lena watched this fierce, curious 8-year-old explain the physics of volcanoes using kitchen supplies and boundless enthusiasm. She found herself answering Emma's questions, engaging with her obvious intelligence, seeing parts of herself in this child who thought deeply and felt intensely. "She likes you," Miles said after Emma had fallen asleep on Lena's couch, exhausted from explaining science. "She's exceptional." "She is, but she doesn't warm up to people easily. Takes after her dad that way." He paused. "She asked if you could come to her school science fair next month." "I'm not—" Lena stopped. "I'd like that." The words felt foreign in her mouth, but also right. Somewhere in the last month, Miles Carter and his daughter had become part of her life. Not employees, not business contacts. Friends. Maybe even family. And that thought terrified her more than any boardroom negotiation ever had. The science fair was held in the elementary school gymnasium, and Lena felt absurdly out of place the moment she walked through the doors. She'd traded her wheelchair for crutches 2 weeks earlier, but mobility still felt precarious, each step requiring calculation and care. Around her, parents milled about in jeans and comfortable shoes, taking photos and examining projects with genuine enthusiasm. Lena stood in her business casual attire. She'd agonized over what to wear, settling on slacks and a blazer that now felt ridiculously formal, and wondered what she'd been thinking accepting this invitation. "You came." Emma appeared like a small tornado, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that was already coming loose, her eyes bright with excitement. "Dad said you might be too busy, but I knew you'd come because you promised, and you don't seem like someone who breaks promises." The assessment was delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd clearly spent time thinking about it. Lena found herself smiling despite her nerves. "I don't break promises," she confirmed. "Where's your project?" "This way. Come on, you have to see it before the judges start." Emma grabbed Lena's free hand and began pulling her through the crowd with complete disregard for the crutches. "Dad's saving our spot. He's been super nervous all morning, which is weird because it's my project, not his. But he says that's what parents do." They navigated past displays on plant growth and solar systems, past baking soda volcanoes and paper mache models, until they reached a table in the corner where Miles stood arranging index cards with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb. "Does this look straight?" he asked without looking up. "Emma, do these look straight to you?" "Dad, they're fine. Look who's here." Miles turned and his face transformed into something warm and relieved. "You made it." "I said I would." "Yeah, but saying and doing are different things, especially when you're still recovering." He gestured at her crutches. "How's the ankle?" "Getting stronger. Physical therapy is exactly as terrible as advertised." "Dad cried during his physical therapy," Emma announced cheerfully. "After his knee surgery. He said they were tears of pain and frustration, but I think he was just being a baby about it." "Emma." "What? You did cry. It's okay to cry. You're the one who's always saying it's healthy to express emotions." Miles looked at Lena with an expression somewhere between mortification and resignation. "This is what I get for being emotionally available." "This is what you get for raising a smart kid," Lena corrected. She turned to Emma's display board, genuinely curious. "Tell me about your project." Emma's entire demeanor shifted into presentation mode. "It's about neuroplasticity and learning acquisition. Basically, I wanted to know if you can train your brain to learn new things faster by practicing learning itself. So I spent 6 weeks teaching myself different skills, juggling, basic coding, conversational French, origami, and tracked how long each one took to reach basic competency. My hypothesis was that each subsequent skill would be acquired faster than the previous one because my brain was developing meta-learning patterns." Lena stared at the 8-year-old who'd just delivered that explanation with perfect clarity. That's actually brilliant." "I know, right?" Emma beamed. "Dad thought it was too complicated for my grade level, but I told him that's exactly the kind of limited thinking that holds people back. If you're smart enough to design the experiment, you're smart enough to execute it." "Where did she come from?" Lena asked Miles quietly. "I have no idea. Some days I think the hospital switched babies on us." But the pride in his voice was unmistakable. For the next hour, Lena watched Emma present her project to judges and curious parents with the confidence of someone 3 times her age. She fielded questions about methodology and statistical significance, discussed limitations in her sample size, and admitted that her results were inconclusive but suggested interesting directions for future research. It was the kind of intellectual honesty Lena rarely saw in adults, let alone children. "She's remarkable," Lena said during a quiet moment when Emma was occupied with other viewers. "She's exhausting," Miles said, but there was no real complaint in it. Last week she decided she wanted to understand quantum mechanics, checked out 6 books from the library, watched hours of lectures online. I have no idea what she's talking about half the time." "You must be proud." "Terrified, mostly. How do you raise a kid who's smarter than you? How do you guide someone when you can barely keep up?" "You do what you're doing. You show up, you support her, you let her be exceptional instead of trying to make her normal." Miles looked at her carefully. "Is that what happened to you? Someone tried to make you normal?" The question landed harder than Lena expected. She thought about her mother's boyfriends, about foster homes where being smart was seen as showing off, about teachers who'd suggested she try harder to fit in instead of encouraging her to stand out. "Everyone tried to make me normal," she said. "I spent my whole childhood being told to be quieter, smaller, less. That's part of why I built what I built, so I'd never have to shrink myself again. Emma's lucky, then, that she has you as an example. I'm not, Lena stopped. I'm not really part of her life. Aren't you? You're here. You came to her science fair. You answer her questions about business and technology when she calls. You sent her that robotics kit last week. It was being part of her life, whether you call it that or not. Before Lena could respond, Emma returned, practically vibrating with excitement. I got second place. Mr. Harrison said my methodology was impressive and my presentation was the best in my category. Second place, can you believe it? Who got first? Miles asked. Marcus Chen. His project was about sustainable energy solutions using household materials. It was actually really good. I told him we should collaborate next year. Emma turned to Lena. Do you think Sterling Tech would sponsor a joint research project between two elementary school students? Because I have ideas about applications that could scale commercially. Lena found herself laughing. Let's get you through fourth grade first, then we'll talk about commercial applications. That's not a no, Emma pointed out. They celebrated with pizza at a restaurant that was too loud and too crowded and exactly the kind of place Lena would normally avoid. Emma monopolized the conversation, explaining her plans for future science fair projects with the kind of detail usually reserved for board presentations. Miles interjected with dad jokes and gentle reality checks, and Lena sat there, eating mediocre pizza and listening to an 8-year-old explain neural pathways, and realized she was happy. When had she last been happy? Not satisfied with a successful deal or pleased with quarterly earnings? Actually happy. The feeling was so unfamiliar, it took her a moment to identify it. You okay? Miles asked during a lull while Emma was in the bathroom. Fine, just thinking. About? How strange this is. Being here with you and Emma. I don't do this. Do what? Any of it. Casual dinners, school events, relationships that aren't transactional. I don't have friends, Miles. I have employees and board members and business contacts. This is new territory. How's it feel? Lena considered the question seriously. Terrifying. And good. Both at the same time. Yeah, that sounds about right. Most good things are a little terrifying. Emma returned before Lena could respond, but the conversation stayed with her for the rest of the evening. When Miles dropped her off at her apartment, Emma had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted from her big day. Lena found herself reluctant to leave the car. Thank you for inviting me, she said. Thank you for coming. It meant a lot to Emma, to both of us. I enjoyed it, more than I expected to. Miles smiled. Good. Because Emma's already planning her next project and she's definitely going to want your input. Something about artificial intelligence and ethical decision-making frameworks. Fair warning. I look forward to it. She did, Lena realized as she made her way upstairs. She genuinely looked forward to more afternoons with Emma, more terrible pancake attempts with Miles, more of this strange new life that had somehow grown around the edges of her carefully controlled existence. The feeling lasted 3 weeks. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything shifted. Lena was back at Sterling Tech part-time, easing into her schedule with half-days and frequent breaks. Her ankle was healing well, though she still used a cane for stability. She'd just finished a meeting when her assistant knocked on her office door. Ms. Hart, Miles Carter is here to see you. Lena looked up, surprised. Miles usually texted before stopping by. Send him in. But when Miles entered, he wasn't alone. Emma was with him, and her face was blotchy from crying. Miles looked like he was holding himself together through sheer force of will. What happened? Lena was on her feet immediately, her cane forgotten. Emma's teacher called, Miles said, his voice tight. There was an incident at school. I pulled her out early. I'm sorry to barge in like this, but our apartment's being fumigated and I didn't know where else. Sit, Lena interrupted. Both of you. What kind of incident? Emma curled into herself on the couch and Miles sat beside her, one protective arm around her shoulders. Some kids were bullying her, about being smart, called her a know-it-all, told her nobody likes her. That's not even the worst part, Emma said, her voice small in a way Lena had never heard. They locked me in the supply closet during recess, said I needed to learn what it felt like to be shut out since I thought I was better than everyone. The room tilted. Lena heard the words through a rushing sound in her ears, felt herself back in that basement, 8 years old and screaming for someone to let her out. She gripped the edge of her desk, fighting the wave of memory that threatened to pull her under. "How long?" she managed. 20 minutes before a teacher found her, Miles said. "The school's handling it, but Emma's pretty shaken up." "I couldn't breathe," Emma whispered. "It was dark and I couldn't breathe, and I thought they'd forgotten about me. I thought no one would come." Lena crossed to the couch and sat on Emma's other side, moving carefully despite the urgency screaming through her system. "But someone did come. The teacher found you." "But what if they hadn't? What if I'd been there for hours? What if—" "Emma, look at me." Lena waited until the girl's tear-filled eyes met hers. "I know exactly how you feel. When I was your age, someone locked me in a basement more than once. It was dark and I was alone and I was terrified." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And I'm going to tell you what I wish someone had told me then. What happened to you wasn't your fault. Being smart isn't something to apologize for. Those kids were wrong and cruel, and the adults who are supposed to protect you will make sure it doesn't happen again." "How do you know?" "Because I'm going to make sure of it." Miles gave her a warning look. "Lena, I'm serious. What's the school's name? Who's the principal?" "You can't just watch me." Lena was already reaching for her phone. "No child should go through what we went through, Emma. And no child in this city is going to go through it if I have anything to say about it." Over the next 2 hours, Lena made calls. She contacted the school board, the district superintendent, and 3 different advocacy organizations. She was polite, professional, and absolutely unyielding. By the time she finished, there were meetings scheduled, policies being reviewed, and a very nervous principal who'd promised a full investigation. Emma watched the whole thing with wide eyes. "You're scary when you're mad." "I'm effective when I'm mad. There's a difference." "Can you teach me to be like that?" "Emma," Miles started, but Lena held up a hand. "You don't need to be like me, Emma. You need to be like you. But I can teach you how to make sure people listen when you speak, how to stand your ground without backing down, how to use your intelligence as power instead of hiding it to make other people comfortable." Miles's expression was complicated, grateful, but also worried. "Can we talk? Privately?" Lena led him to her office while Emma settled on the couch with a tablet. Once the door was closed, Miles turned to her with careful intensity. "Thank you for what you did. For Emma. For calling the school. You don't sound entirely happy about it. I'm not entirely sure what just happened. One minute Emma's upset, the next you're orchestrating a complete overhaul of the district's bullying policies. Is that a problem?" "It's a lot, and it's moving really fast." Miles ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I appreciate the help, but Emma's my daughter. I need to be the one making decisions about how to handle things." The words stung more than Lena expected. "I wasn't trying to overstep." "I know, but you did. You went from 0 to scorched earth in about 30 seconds without asking what I wanted you to do." "What you wanted?" "Miles, a child was locked in a closet. Your child. Our—" She stopped, the possessive word catching in her throat. "Our?" Miles asked quietly. "I just meant I care about her. About both of you. I was trying to help." "By taking control? By fixing everything like it's a business problem? What's wrong with fixing things?" "Nothing, when it's your problem to fix." "But this is my family, Lena, not your company." The distinction hit like a slap. Lena felt herself retreating behind familiar walls, the ones that had kept her safe for 36 years. "You're right. I apologize. I overstepped." "That's not—" Miles sighed. "I'm not trying to shut you out, but you can't just bulldoze your way through Emma's life because you have the resources to do it. She's not a project. She's a kid who needs consistency and boundaries, not someone swooping in to fix everything with phone calls and influence." "I was just trying to protect her." "I know, and that impulse comes from a good place. But she has a parent. She has me. And I need you to trust that I can handle this." The rational part of Lena knew he was right. The rest of her felt like she was being pushed away, told she wasn't needed, reminded that this wasn't really her family, no matter how much it felt like it was becoming one. "Understood," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "It won't happen again." "Lena, don't do that. Don't go cold on me." "I'm not going cold. I'm respecting your boundaries." "No, you're shutting down. There's a difference." But Lena was already moving toward the door, already reconstructing the distance between them. You should take Emma home. I'm sure she's tired. Lena, I have work to do anyway. I'll see you around. She opened the door before Miles could respond, keeping her expression carefully neutral as he collected Emma and left. Emma hugged her goodbye, thanked her for helping, asked when she'd see her again. Lena murmured something non-committal and watched them go. Then she sat at her desk and stared at the city below, and wondered why doing the right thing felt so much like being locked in a basement again. The days that followed felt like regression. Lena threw herself back into work with the kind of intensity she'd spent the last 2 months learning to avoid. She stopped answering Miles's calls, responded to his texts with brief, professional replies. When Emma called to talk about her science project, Lena kept the conversation short, suggested Emma discuss it with her father instead. She was protecting herself. She knew that. Miles had been right. She'd overstepped, tried to control a situation that wasn't hers to control. Better to back off now than get more attached, more involved, more vulnerable. Better to be alone than risk being shut out. It took a week before Miles showed up at her apartment unannounced. Lena almost didn't answer the door, but she'd never been a coward, so she opened it and faced him. "You're avoiding me," Miles said without preamble. "I'm respecting your boundaries." "By disappearing? By cutting off Emma?" "I'm not cutting off anyone. I'm just giving you space to parent without interference." "That's bullshit, and you know it." Miles pushed past her into the apartment. "You're running away because I called you out on something, and you don't know how to handle conflict in a relationship that actually matters. That's not, isn't it? The second things got complicated, the second I pushed back, you retreated, just like you always do when someone gets too close." Lena felt her defenses rising. "You told me I was overstepping. You told me Emma was your daughter, not my responsibility. I was listening to you. I told you that you needed to check with me before making major decisions. I didn't tell you to disappear from our lives." It felt like you were telling me I didn't belong. The admission came out raw and unfiltered, and Lena immediately regretted it. Miles's expression softened. "Is that what you heard?" he asked quietly. "That you don't belong?" "What else was I supposed to hear? You made it very clear that I'm not family, that Emma's yours, not ours. And you're right. I got confused. I forgot my place." "Your place?" Miles crossed the room to stand in front of her. "Lena, you don't have a place. That's not how this works. You're not an employee or a contractor. You're someone we care about, someone who's become important to us." "Then why did it feel like you were pushing me away?" "Because I was setting a boundary. That's different than rejection. I need to be Emma's primary parent. That's my job. But that doesn't mean I don't want you in her life. In both our lives." Lena shook her head. "I don't know how to do this, Miles. I don't know how to be part of something without controlling it. I don't know how to care about people without trying to fix everything. It's the only way I know how to show love. By solving problems, by using my resources to make things better. And if that's not what you want from me, then I don't know what I'm supposed to offer." "Yourself," Miles said simply. "Just you. Not your money, or your influence, or your ability to make phone calls that move mountains. Just you, showing up, being present. That's all Emma needs. That's all I need." "That doesn't feel like enough." "It's everything." The words hung between them, and Lena felt something crack in her chest. She'd spent her entire life proving her worth through achievement, through success, through what she could do and provide. The idea that just existing was enough felt impossible. "I scared her," Lena said finally. "When I made those calls, I saw Emma's face, and I was back in that basement, and I just wanted to make sure no one ever made her feel that way again, but I scared her with how intense I got." She wasn't scared. She was impressed, maybe a little overwhelmed, but impressed. Miles hesitated. "She asked me later if you were always like that. I told her only when protecting people she loves." "I do love her," Lena whispered. "Both of you, and that terrifies me." I know. But here's the thing about love. It's supposed to be a little terrifying. If it's not, you're not doing it right." Lena laughed despite herself. "That's a terrible philosophy. It's worked for me so far." He reached out, took her hand. "Come back. Stop hiding. Emma misses you. I miss you. What if I mess up again?" "You will. So will I. That's part of it. But we'll figure it out together instead of you running away every time things get hard." It was such a simple offer, and such an impossible one. Lena had spent 36 years believing that love was conditional, that belonging was earned, that the moment you stopped being useful was the moment you got left behind. Everything Miles was offering contradicted every survival lesson she'd learned. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "You're already doing it. You've been doing it for months. You're just scared to call it what it is." "What is it?" Miles smiled. "Family. Messy, complicated, imperfect family, but family nonetheless." The word should have sent her running. Instead, Lena found herself moving closer, letting Miles pull her into a hug, allowing herself to be held without trying to control the moment or calculate the cost. It felt vulnerable and terrifying and somehow safe all at once. "I'm sorry," she said against his shoulder, "for overstepping, for disappearing, for not knowing how to do this. I'm sorry for not being clearer, for making you feel like you didn't belong." He pulled back to look at her. "We'll figure it out, okay? One terrible pancake at a time." "Your pancakes really are terrible." "I know, it's a gift." They stood there for a long moment, and Lena let herself imagine what it might be like to actually do this, to be part of a family, to let people in, to stop running every time things got complicated. It still terrified her, but maybe Miles was right. Maybe the terrifying things were worth it. Her phone rang, shattering the moment. Lena glanced at the screen and her blood went cold. Emma's school. "Hello? Miss Hart? This is Principal Morrison. There's been an incident. Emma's missing." The world stopped. "What do you mean missing?" Miles grabbed the phone from her hand. "What happened? Where is she?" Lena watched his face drain of color as he listened. When he hung up, his hand was shaking. "She didn't come back from lunch. They've searched the building. She's not there." For one horrible second, Lena was 8 years old again, locked in darkness, screaming for someone to find her. Then training kicked in. The same focus that had built empires, now laser-focused on one goal. "How long?" she asked. 90 minutes. "Have they called the police?" "They're on their way." Lena was already grabbing her keys, her phone, moving toward the door. "Then we go now. We find her." Miles caught her arm. "Lena, the police can search by the book. We search everywhere else." She met his eyes. "I know what it's like to be trapped and alone and terrified. I know what it's like to wait for someone to find you. We are not waiting." Something shifted in Miles's expression. "Okay. Where do we start?" "Everywhere." They drove to the school in tense silence. Police cars were already there, officers taking statements. Principal Morrison met them at the entrance, her face pale with barely controlled panic. "We've searched every classroom, every closet, the cafeteria, the gym." "Where wouldn't you search?" Lena interrupted. Where would a scared 8-year-old go to hide?" "We've been thorough." "Where wouldn't you search?" The principal hesitated. "The old maintenance tunnels, but they've been sealed for years. There's no way." Lena and Miles exchanged a look and moved as one toward the basement access. The door was locked, but Lena had learned long ago that locks were just obstacles waiting to be overcome. She pulled a credit card from her wallet, worked the mechanism, and pushed through. The basement was exactly what Lena expected: dark, musty, forgotten. The kind of place where scared children went when the world above became too much. The kind of place where you could disappear and no one would think to look. "Emma!" Miles called out. "Emma, if you can hear me, make a noise." Nothing. Just the drip of water and the creak of old pipes. "Emma! It's Lena!" She moved deeper into the darkness, remembering every time she'd hidden in places like this. "I know you're scared. I know you feel alone, but we're here. We came for you. We'll always come for you." A sound, small, muffled, coming from behind an old boiler. They found her curled in a corner, knees pulled to her chest, face streaked with tears. She looked up as they approached, and the relief in her eyes was devastating. "I didn't know where else to go," Emma whispered. "Those kids were saying things again, and the teacher didn't stop them, and I just needed to be somewhere quiet and dark where I could think, and then I couldn't find my way out, and I was scared you wouldn't know where to look, and—" Miles had her in his arms before she could finish, holding her tight enough that Lena could see his whole body shaking. "I've got you. I've got you. You're safe." Lena knelt beside them, her own hands trembling. "We will always know where to look, Emma. always. Because we know what it's like to be lost, and we will never stop searching until we find you." Emma reached out and pulled Lena into the embrace, and the three of them sat there in the darkness of a basement that had almost become another cage, another moment of abandonment, another proof that the world didn't care. Except this time, someone had cared. This time, someone had come. This time, no one was left behind. They sat in that basement for a long time after Emma stopped crying, none of them quite ready to return to the world above. The police had been notified, the principal had been assured, but for this moment, they existed in a small pocket of time where nothing mattered except the fact that they were together. "I'm sorry," Emma said finally, her voice still shaky. "I didn't mean to scare everyone. I just needed to get away, and then I got turned around in the dark, and I couldn't find the door, and—" "Stop apologizing," Lena said gently. "You did what you needed to do to feel safe. That's not something to be sorry for." "But everyone was looking for me. The police came. I caused so much trouble." Miles pulled back to look at his daughter. "Emma, you're 8 years old and you are being bullied. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to handle everything on your own." "Well, but you always say I'm smart enough to figure things out." "Being smart doesn't mean you never need help. It means knowing when to ask for it." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "What happened today? What did those kids say?" Emma's face crumpled. "They said I think I'm better than everyone, that I'm trying too hard, that even my own mom didn't want to be around me because I'm too weird, and that's why she moved away." The words hit Miles like a physical blow. Lena saw him flinch, saw the guilt and anger war across his features. She put a hand on his shoulder, grounding him before he could spiral. "Those kids are cruel and wrong," Lena said, her voice steel wrapped in silk. "Your mother moved because of adult problems that have nothing to do with you. And being smart isn't weird, it's a gift. But it's a gift that sometimes makes other people uncomfortable because it reminds them of their own limitations." "Is that what happened to you?" Emma asked. "When you were my age?" "Every single day. People told me to stop showing off, to stop asking questions, to stop making them feel stupid just by existing. So I learned to make myself small. I learned to hide what I was capable of until I was old enough to leave, and then I spent the rest of my life making sure no one could ever make me feel small again." "Is that why you're so scary when you're mad?" Despite everything, Lena smiled. "Partly. But also because I learned that sometimes being scary is the only way to protect the things that matter." Emma considered this. "Like how you called all those people about the school?" "Exactly like that. Dad said you went too far." Miles winced. "Emma, I didn't—" "It's okay," Lena interrupted. "Your dad was right. I should have talked to him first before making those calls. I was so focused on protecting you that I forgot to respect his role as your parent." "But you were protecting me because you loved me, right?" The question was asked with the devastating directness that only children possess. Lena felt her throat tighten. "Yes," she said. "I was. I am. I do." "Then I don't think you went too far. I think you went exactly far enough." Emma looked between them. "Can we go home now? I'm really tired." They emerged from the basement to find a small crowd of worried teachers and lingering police officers. Miles handled the official statements while Lena kept Emma close, shielding her from the curious stares and whispered conversations. Principal Morrison tried to approach, full of apologies and assurances, but Lena cut her off with a look that could have frozen fire. "We'll be in touch," was all she said, and the principal wisely retreated. The drive back to Miles's apartment was quiet. Emma dozed in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. Miles kept his hands tight on the steering wheel, his jaw working as he processed everything that had happened. "I should have known," he said finally. "The bullying was getting worse, and I should have pulled her out, should have homeschooled her, should have what? Wrapped her in bubble wrap and kept her locked away from the world?" Lena shook her head. "You can't protect her from everything, Miles. None of us can." "I should be able to protect her from this." "But you did protect her. You taught her that when things get overwhelming, it's okay to find a safe space. You taught her that people who love her will come looking. You taught her she's not alone." Lena glanced back at Emma's sleeping form. "The problem isn't your parenting. It's a school system that doesn't know how to handle exceptional children and cruel kids whose parents never taught them basic human decency. So what do we do? The "we" didn't escape Lena's notice. She let it settle in her chest, warm and terrifying and right. "We figure it out together," she said. "Like you told me earlier, one terrible pancake at a time." Miles laughed, short and surprised. "I'm starting to think my pancakes are a metaphor for my entire life. If it helps, they're getting slightly less terrible. Last week's batch was almost edible." High praise from someone who once compared them to hockey pucks. They pulled up to Miles's apartment building, a modest complex in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be up and coming. Lena had been here a few times now, enough to know that Miles's apartment was small but carefully maintained, filled with Emma's art projects and science fair ribbons, and evidence of a life built on love rather than money. Miles carried a still sleeping Emma upstairs while Lena followed, suddenly uncertain of her place in this domestic ritual. But when Miles laid Emma on her bed and gestured for Lena to help remove her shoes, the uncertainty faded. They worked together in silent coordination, getting Emma changed into pajamas and tucked under covers without fully waking her. "Stay for a bit?" Miles asked quietly as they closed Emma's door. "I could use the company." Lena nodded and they moved to the small living room. Miles collapsed on the couch like someone who'd been running on adrenaline and had finally run out. Lena sat beside him, close but not touching, giving him space to process. "I hate this," Miles said after a long silence. "I hate that she's going through what we went through. I hate that I can't just fix it." "Welcome to my world. The difference is you know better than to try to control everything." "Do I? Because right now I want to march back to that school and make sure those kids never look at her wrong again. The impulse is normal. It's what you do with it that matters." Miles looked at her. "What would you do?" "Really?" Lena considered the question honestly. 3 months ago, I would have destroyed them. Called their parents, threatened legal action, made sure everyone involved understood that hurting Emma came with consequences. I would have used every resource at my disposal to make the problem disappear. And now? Now I'd probably do about 70% of that. But I'd check with you first. Despite everything, Miles smiled. Progress. The baby steps toward being a functional human being. It's my new hobby. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Lena could hear Emma's soft breathing from the bedroom, the distant sounds of neighbors, the hum of the refrigerator. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary apartment, the kind of peaceful domesticity she'd never thought she wanted. "Can I ask you something?" Miles said eventually. "Always." "What happens now, with us? Because I need to know what this is, Lena. I need to know if you're going to disappear again the next time things get complicated." The question deserved honesty. "I don't know what this is. I've never had this before, whatever this is. But I know I don't want to lose it, and I know I'm going to mess up, probably frequently because I don't have a manual for how to be part of a family. Nobody has a manual. We're all making it up. You make it look easy. Because you're not seeing the nights I lie awake wondering if I'm screwing her up, the times I doubt every decision, the moments I feel completely out of my depth." Miles shifted to face her fully. "But I show up anyway, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Is that what you need from me? Showing up? That's all I've ever needed from you. Not your money or your influence or your ability to solve problems with phone calls. Just you. Present, committed. Not running away when things get messy." Lena felt the familiar urge to retreat, to find 1,000 logical reasons why this couldn't work, why she wasn't cut out for this kind of relationship. But she thought about Emma in that basement, about the relief in her eyes when they found her, about the simple truth that sometimes love meant showing up even when you didn't have all the answers. "I can do that," she said. "I want to do that, but I need you to be patient with me, and I need you to tell me when I'm overstepping before it becomes a fight. Deal. As long as you promise to tell me when you're feeling shut out instead of just disappearing." "Deal." They shook on it, formal and ridiculous, and then Miles pulled her into a kiss that started soft and became something deeper, more urgent. Lena let herself fall into it, let herself want this without calculating the risk, let herself be vulnerable in a way that still terrified her but no longer felt impossible. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Miles rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight," he said. Not for anything except being here. Emma's going to need both of us when she wakes up. Both of us, Lena repeated, testing the words. Both of us, if that's okay. It was more than okay. It was everything she'd never known she wanted. The next few weeks unfolded in a strange new rhythm. Lena started working from Miles's apartment 2 days a week, setting up a makeshift office at the kitchen table while Emma did homework nearby. They had dinner together most nights. Sometimes Lena cooked, sometimes Miles attempted to cook, and Lena gently took over. Sometimes they ordered pizza and let Emma choose the toppings. Lena learned the routines of family life. She learned that Emma needed exactly 3 bedtime stories, that Miles was unbearable before his first cup of coffee, that Sunday mornings meant pancakes no matter how terrible they turned out. She learned to recognize the signs when Emma was having a hard day at school, when Miles was worrying about money, when the small apartment felt too small for the big emotions they were all navigating. And she learned slowly to ask for what she needed instead of assuming she needed nothing. "I want to help," she told Miles one evening after Emma had gone to bed. They were cleaning up dinner, falling into the comfortable choreography of people who'd shared space long enough to know each other's movements. "Financially, with Emma's school, with this apartment, I have resources and, Lena, I know what you're going to say, that you don't need my money, that you're handling it. But Miles, I want to contribute. I want to be part of this family in concrete ways, not just emotional ones." Miles dried his hands carefully. "What did you have in mind?" "There's a private school across town, small classes, emphasis on gifted education, strong anti-bullying policies. I want to pay for Emma to go there." "That's a lot of money." "I have a lot of money, and I can't think of a better use for it than making sure Emma has the education she deserves." Miles was quiet for a long moment. Lena braced herself for rejection, for pride, for all the reasons he might say no. "On one condition," he said finally. "What's that?" "We discuss it with Emma first. This affects her life. She gets a vote." It was so perfectly Miles, practical, egalitarian, treating his 8-year-old daughter like a person whose opinions mattered. Lena felt a wave of affection so strong it almost knocked her over. "That's fair," she said. They presented the idea to Emma the next morning over breakfast. Lena had prepared talking points, anticipated questions, readied herself for a negotiation. Emma listened carefully, asked 3 clarifying questions, and then said simply, "Would you come to my school stuff, like you came to the science fair?" "Of course," Lena said without hesitation. "And would I still live here with Dad?" "Nothing about that would change," Miles confirmed. "And we'd still have pancake Sundays?" "Always." Emma considered this. "Okay then, I want to go to the new school, but only if they have a good science program. I'm not going anywhere that treats science like it's less important than sports." "I'll make sure they have an excellent science program," Lena promised, "and a robotics club." "And a robotics club. And if there are mean kids there, you'll help make sure they stop being mean?" Lena met Emma's eyes. "I will do everything in my power to make sure you're safe and supported. But Emma, there might be mean kids everywhere you go. Part of growing up is learning to handle that." "I know, but it's easier when you know someone has your back." "We'll always have your back," Miles said. "Both of us, no matter what." The enrollment process moved quickly when Lena applied her particular brand of focused intensity to it. Within 3 weeks, Emma was registered at Brightwood Academy, outfitted with a new uniform and cautiously excited about the change. But the real shift happened on a random Tuesday afternoon. Lena was working at Miles's kitchen table, reviewing quarterly reports, when Emma came home from her last day at the old school. She dropped her backpack by the door and walked directly to where Lena sat. "Can I talk to you?" Emma asked. "Privately?" Miles, who'd been making snacks in the kitchen, raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I'll be in my room if you need me." Once he was gone, Emma climbed into the chair across from Lena. Her expression was serious in that way children get when they're trying to have adult conversations. "What's on your mind?" Lena asked, closing her laptop to give Emma her full attention. "Are you going to be my mom?" The question landed like a bomb in the quiet apartment. Lena's first instinct was to deflect, to offer some carefully worded non-answer that would protect them both. But Emma deserved better than that. "I don't know," Lena said honestly. "Your dad and I haven't talked about that. But you want to be, right? I can tell you want to be." How can you tell? Because you look at me the way Dad looks at me. Like you'd do anything to keep me safe. Like you're proud of me even when I mess up. Like I matter more than anything else. Emma twisted her hands together. My real mom doesn't look at me like that anymore. She looks at me like I'm homework she forgot to finish. The casual cruelty of the observation broke Lena's heart. Emma, I don't need her to come back. I used to think I did, but I don't. I have Dad, and now I have you. If you want to stay. I want to stay, Lena said, the words coming out fierce and certain. Emma, I've never wanted anything more than I want to be part of your life. But being a parent is complicated. It's not just about wanting it. Why not? Dad says the best things in life are the ones you choose, not the ones that just happen to you. He chose to be my dad every day, even when it was hard. Can't you choose to be my mom the same way? Lena felt tears burning in her eyes. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I don't know how. I never had a good mother. I don't have a model for what that looks like. What if I do it wrong? What if I hurt you? Emma reached across the table and took Lena's hand. The gesture was so simple, so trusting, that Lena almost broke. You already know how, Emma said. You show up. You listen. You help me with science projects. You made those calls to protect me. You found me in the basement when I was scared. That's what moms do. Your dad does all those things too. Yeah, but he's my dad. That's different. I need both. And I think you need both of us too. The observation was too accurate to deny. Lena had built an empire, commanded boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar deals. But this 8-year-old saw her more clearly than anyone ever had. You're right, Lena admitted. I do need both of you, more than I've ever needed anything. So why are we even talking about this? Just stay. Be my mom. It doesn't have to be complicated. Emma, I need to talk to your dad first. This is a decision we have to make together. He'll say yes. He looks at you the way he used to look at my birth mom before everything got sad, except better, less worried, more happy. When did you get so observant? I've always been observant. You just weren't paying attention. Emma squeezed Lena's hand. Will you talk to him soon? I want to know if I can start calling you Mom. The casual way she said it, as if it were already decided, already real, made Lena's breath catch. Soon, she promised. I'll talk to him soon. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Lena found Miles on the small balcony of his apartment. He was drinking beer and staring at the city lights, looking tired and pensive. Emma talked to you today, he said without preamble. You knew? She's not exactly subtle. She's been dropping hints for weeks about you being around permanently. And what do you think about that? Miles took a long drink before answering. I think I'm terrified. I think bringing someone into Emma's life in that capacity is a huge risk. I think my track record with relationships is pretty terrible. He set down the beer and turned to face her. And I think I'm completely in love with you, and I can't imagine our lives without you in them anymore. Lena's heart stuttered. You love me? Of course I love you. How could I not? You're brilliant and fierce and terrible at accepting help, and you make the best pancakes I've ever tasted. You walked into my life and turned everything upside down, and I wouldn't change a single thing. I'm difficult. I'm controlling. I work too much. I don't know how to be a partner or a parent. I'll mess this up. Probably. And I'll mess it up too. We'll mess it up together and then we'll figure it out. Miles reached for her hand. Lena, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to stay. To be part of this messy, imperfect, beautiful thing we're building. To be Emma's mom and my partner and yourself all at the same time. What if I can't do it? What if you can? The question hung in the night air between them. Below, the city hummed with life. Millions of people living their complicated, messy, beautiful lives. Somewhere in that vastness, Lena had built an empire. But right here, on this small balcony, with this patient man and his extraordinary daughter sleeping inside, she'd found something bigger. I want to try, she said. I want to stay. I want to be Emma's mom and your partner and see where this goes. I'm terrified and I'll probably mess it up, but I want to try. Miles pulled her close. That's all I needed to hear. They stood there for a long time, holding each other under the stars. And Lena thought about basements and locked doors, and all the time she'd been left behind. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, alone in her office, lying on a cold floor, convinced that needing anyone was weakness. She'd been so wrong. The real weakness was never letting anyone close enough to need. The real strength was standing here, vulnerable and terrified and willing to risk everything for the chance to be part of something real. "Miles?" she said softly. "Yeah? I love you too, both of you. I don't know if I'm saying it right or if I'm supposed to wait longer or—" He kissed her quiet, and when he pulled back, he was smiling. "You're saying it perfectly." Inside the apartment, Emma's voice called out, "Are you guys done being mushy? Because I heard everything, and I want to celebrate with ice cream." They looked at each other and started laughing. So much for private moments. "How long has she been awake?" Lena asked. "Knowing Emma the entire time." They went inside to find Emma sitting on the couch, looking extremely pleased with herself. "Ice cream for everyone who's part of this family," she announced, "which is all of us now, officially." "Shouldn't we have a more formal conversation about this?" Lena asked. "We just did. You said you love us. Dad said he loves you. I've loved you since the science fair. Everyone's on board. Now can we please have ice cream?" Miles looked at Lena. "She has a point. She always has a point." "That's because I'm smart," Emma said matter-of-factly. "It's genetic. I get it from both my parents." The casual way she said it, both my parents, as if Lena had always been there, made Lena's chest tight with emotion. Emma had already decided. Miles had decided. The only person who'd been holding back was Lena herself. "Okay," she said. "Ice cream for everyone. But then we have a serious conversation about what this means and what changes, and—" "Nothing changes," Emma interrupted. "Except now you're officially family instead of unofficially family. Everything else stays the same. Pancake Sundays, science projects, terrible jokes from Dad, you being scary when you need to be. We just do it together. As a family." It was the simplest definition of family Lena had ever heard. And somehow, it was also the most perfect. They ate ice cream on the couch, Emma wedged between them, chattering about her new school and her robotics plans, and all the science fair projects she wanted to work on. Miles kept his arm around both of them, solid and steady. And Lena sat there eating chocolate ice cream at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night and realized this was happiness. Not the achievement kind, not the success kind, the real kind. The messy, imperfect, ordinary, extraordinary kind that came from being exactly where you belonged. Later, after Emma finally fell asleep on the couch and Miles had carried her to bed, Lena stood in the small apartment and looked at her new life. There would be hard conversations ahead, legal discussions about guardianship, negotiations about living arrangements, 1,000 practical details to work through. But right now, in this moment, all that mattered was that she was here. She'd been found. She'd been chosen. She belonged. And for the first time in 36 years, Lena Hart wasn't alone. The practical realities of becoming a family hit 3 days later when Lena's lawyer called about the guardianship paperwork. She was at Sterling Tech, reviewing expansion plans when the call came through. "Ms. Hart, I need to ask some difficult questions about your relationship with Miles Carter and his daughter. The court will want documentation, background checks, evidence of stable cohabitation. This isn't something you can rush." Lena looked at the skyline beyond her window, at the city she'd conquered through sheer force of will. "How long will it take?" 6 months minimum, possibly longer if the biological mother contests. She won't contest. She signed over primary custody years ago. People change their minds when money gets involved. And Ms. Hart, your net worth is a matter of public record. If she decides she wants a piece of that, then we'll deal with it. Lena cut him off. "Draw up the papers. Do whatever needs to be done. I want this legally binding." She hung up and sat in the silence of her office, the same office where she'd almost died 6 months ago. So much had changed since that night. She'd changed. The woman who'd stayed behind during a fire drill because work mattered more than safety felt like a stranger now. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Dad's making tacos for dinner. He says he doesn't need help, but we both know he does. Come save us." Lena smiled and typed back, "On my way." She gathered her things, delegated the rest of her meetings, and left. The old Lena would have stayed until midnight. The new Lena knew that tacos with her family mattered more than quarterly projections. Traffic was terrible, and by the time she reached Miles's apartment, she could smell something burning from the hallway. She let herself in with the key Miles had given her last week, a small gesture that had felt monumental, to find Miles frantically waving a towel at the smoke detector while Emma stood on a chair, trying to reach the battery. "It's fine," Miles called over the beeping. "Everything's fine. I just slightly charred the meat." "Slightly?" Emma shouted. "Dad, it's literally black." Lena crossed to the stove, assessed the damage, and turned off the burner. "How did you burn ground beef?" "I got distracted. Emma was explaining quantum entanglement, and I forgot I was cooking." "In my defense," Emma said, finally silencing the smoke detector, "quantum entanglement is way more interesting than ground beef." Lena looked at the pan of carbonized meat, then at Miles's sheepish expression, then at Emma's completely unrepentant face. "Both of you, out of the kitchen. I'll handle dinner. You don't have to out now, before you burn down the building." 20 minutes later, they were eating salvaged tacos. Lena had managed to rescue enough usable meat by cutting away the burnt parts, and Emma was explaining her latest theory about parallel universes. "So, theoretically," she said around a mouthful of taco, "there could be infinite versions of us making infinite different choices. In one universe, maybe you didn't come to Dad's rescue that night. In another, maybe you did, but you never came back. In another, your dad actually knows how to cook," Lena suggested. "That's scientifically implausible," Emma said seriously. "Some things are consistent across all possible universes." Miles threw a napkin at her, and Emma dissolved into giggles. Lena watched them, memorizing this moment, the ordinary magic of it, the simple joy of being together. Her phone rang. She almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed her lawyer again. "I need to take this," she said, stepping into the bedroom. "Ms. Hart, we have a problem. Emma's biological mother just filed a petition for renewed custody." Lena's blood went cold. "What?" "Apparently she's remarried, settled down in Portland, and wants Emma back. She's claiming Miles is an unfit parent and that you're an inappropriate influence." "That's insane. Miles is an excellent parent." "I'm sure he is. But she's got a lawyer and they're making noise about your relationship being unstable, about Emma being exposed to adult situations before appropriate, about Miles using you for your money." "None of that is true." "Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if she can make it sound convincing to a judge." The lawyer paused. "Ms. Hart, this could get ugly. And expensive. Are you prepared for that?" Lena looked through the doorway at Miles and Emma, still laughing over terrible dad jokes. "Do whatever it takes. I don't care what it costs." "Understood. I'll start preparing our response." She hung up and stood there for a moment, trying to calm the rage building in her chest. How dare Emma's mother, a woman who'd walked away, who'd chosen a new life over her own daughter, suddenly decide she wanted back in, and to claim Miles was unfit? Miles, who'd sacrificed everything to give Emma the best life possible? "Lena?" Miles appeared in the doorway. "What's wrong?" She told him, watched his face go from confusion to disbelief to fury. "She can't do this," he said. "She gave up custody. She moved away. She barely calls Emma." "She can do it. Whether she'll win is another question. This will destroy Emma. She's finally happy, finally settled. If her mother comes back now, we won't let it destroy her." Lena took his hands. "Miles, I have resources. I have lawyers. We fight this. It's not about resources. It's about what's best for Emma. What if the court thinks she's better off with her mother? What if they think we're—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "What are we, Lena? Legally? I'm her father. You're— what? My girlfriend? Someone I'm dating? The court won't care about that. They'll care about stable, traditional family structures." The words hurt more than Lena expected, because he was right. In the eyes of the law, she was nothing to Emma. Just someone who'd shown up recently, someone with no legal standing, no claim. "Then we change that," she said. "How?" Lena met his eyes. "Marry me." The silence stretched between them. Miles stared at her like she'd started speaking another language. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. Give the court exactly what they want. A stable, traditional family structure. 2 parents, married, committed to raising Emma together. Lena, you can't just propose marriage as a legal strategy. Well, why not? We love each other. We're already living as a family. Why not make it official? Because marriage is supposed to be about more than legal maneuvering. It's supposed to be about... Miles stopped, shaking his head. This is crazy. Is it? Or is it the most logical solution to an impossible problem? You're talking about getting married to win a custody battle. That's not romantic. I'm talking about getting married because I love you and Emma, and I want to spend the rest of my life with both of you. The custody battle just makes it more urgent. Lena stepped closer. Miles, I was going to ask eventually. Maybe not this week or this month, but eventually, because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. So why wait? Because this is insane, because we've only been together for 6 months, because Emma's mother just filed for custody and you're proposing in a panic, and I'm not panicking. I'm being practical. You're being Lena, taking control, solving problems, trying to fix everything with force of will. What's wrong with that? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Miles sat on the bed looking exhausted. I can't think straight right now. My ex-wife just came back from nowhere trying to take my daughter, and you're proposing marriage, and I feel like I'm drowning. Lena sat beside him, forcing herself to slow down, to listen instead of pushing. I'm sorry. You're right. I'm trying to control this when I can't. When we can't. I want to marry you, Miles said quietly. I do. But not like this. Not as a chess move in a custody battle. That's not fair to you or me or Emma. Then what do? We fight the custody battle on its own merits. We show the court that Emma is happy, healthy, thriving, that I'm a good parent, that our family, however unconventional, is what's best for her. And if we lose, then we lose. But we lose knowing we did it the right way. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the idea that there was a right way to fight for your family. But she could see the exhaustion in Miles's face, the fear beneath the stubbornness. He needed her to trust him, to trust the process, to believe that love and truth would be enough. It went against every instinct she had. But she nodded. Okay, we do it your way. But Miles? She took his hand. The proposal stands, not as strategy, not as panic, as truth. I want to marry you. When you're ready, when the time is right, I want to be your wife and Emma's mother in every way that matters. Miles pulled her close. Ask me again when this is over. When we've won. When we can celebrate properly. I will. They sat there holding each other until Emma knocked on the door, asking if they were done having their serious adult conversation because she wanted to watch a documentary about black holes. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 months later. In that time, Emma's mother, Jessica was her name, though Lena had trouble thinking of her as anything but the woman who left, made her case through her lawyers. She painted a picture of Miles as a struggling single father who'd gotten in over his head, of Lena as a wealthy interloper playing house with other people's lives, of Emma as a vulnerable child being exposed to an unstable situation. None of it was true. All of it sounded convincing. Miles's lawyer built their countercase carefully. Documentation of Emma's academic success, testimonials from teachers, psychological evaluations showing a happy, well-adjusted child. Evidence of Miles's consistent, loving parenting. Character references from everyone who knew them. Lena stayed in the background as much as possible, letting Miles take the lead. It killed her to be passive, to watch him navigate this nightmare while she stood aside. But she'd learned enough about partnership to know when to step back. The night before the hearing, none of them could sleep. Emma had nightmares and crawled into bed between Miles and Lena, seeking comfort from both her parents. They held her until she drifted off again, her small body warm and trusting between them. What if the judge says I have to go? Emma whispered in the darkness. Then we appeal, Miles said. We keep fighting. But what if we lose everything? What if I have to leave and never come back? Lena stroked Emma's hair. That won't happen. How do you know? Because we won't let it. No matter what the judge says, no matter what happens in that courtroom, we are your family. Legal documents don't change that. Distance doesn't change that. Nothing changes that. Promise? Promise, Lena and Miles said together. Emma fell back asleep, but Lena and Miles stayed awake, holding their daughter and each other, preparing themselves for whatever tomorrow would bring. The courtroom was smaller than Lena expected. She'd imagined something grand and imposing, but it was just a modest room with uncomfortable chairs and fluorescent lighting. Jessica sat on one side with her new husband and her lawyer. Miles, Lena, and Emma sat on the other with their legal team. Lena studied Jessica, blonde, put together, wearing an expression of concerned motherhood that probably played well with judges. She looked nothing like Emma, but then Emma looked like Miles. She had his eyes, his stubborn chin, his fierce intelligence. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Catherine Torres. She reviewed the case files with careful attention, asked pointed questions of both lawyers, and finally requested to speak with Emma privately. "It's okay," Miles whispered as Emma stood. "Just tell the truth." Emma nodded and followed the bailiff to the judge's chambers. The wait was excruciating. 15 minutes felt like hours. Lena watched Miles's knee bounce with anxiety, reached over and stilled it with her hand. He gave her a grateful look but couldn't quite manage a smile. When Emma finally emerged, her face was unreadable. She sat back down between them and stared straight ahead, waiting. Judge Torres returned to the bench and adjusted her glasses. "This is a complicated case. We have a mother who made mistakes but claims to have reformed her life. We have a father who's done admirably with limited resources. And we have a child who's clearly loved by multiple people." Lena's heart hammered in her chest. "However," the judge continued, "my primary concern is the best interest of the child. And after speaking with Emma, reviewing the evidence, and considering all factors, I find that her best interest is to remain in her current living situation with her father, Miles Carter." The relief was so powerful Lena actually felt dizzy. Beside her, Miles made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Emma stayed perfectly still, as if afraid to believe it. "Miss Morrison," the judge addressed Jessica, "you are granted supervised visitation rights, 2 weekends per month, pending successful completion of family counseling. Mr. Carter retains primary custody. This court is adjourned." The gavel fell, and just like that, it was over. Jessica stood immediately, her face tight with anger, but her lawyer pulled her aside for a hushed conversation. Miles pulled Emma into a hug so tight it looked like he might never let go. "We won," Emma said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "We actually won." "You won," Miles corrected. "You were so brave in there. What did you tell the judge?" "The truth. That I love you, and I love Lena, and I'm happy. That Mom leaving hurt, but I understand why she did it. That I don't want to leave my family." Lena felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Emma noticed anyway and reached out to include her in the hug. They stood there in the courtroom, the three of them holding each other while lawyers packed up files and the bailiff prepared for the next case. "Can we go home now?" Emma asked eventually. "Yeah," Miles said. "Let's go home." They celebrated that night with truly terrible pancakes. Miles insisted on making them himself, disaster guaranteed, and Emma's favorite ice cream. Lena had offered to take them to any restaurant they wanted, but Emma had been adamant. She wanted to be home, in their apartment, doing their normal things. "Because that's what the judge understood," Emma explained, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "That we're already a family. We don't need to be in some fancy place to prove it." After Emma went to bed, Miles and Lena stood on the balcony again, the same place where Lena had first said she loved him. "I need to tell you something," Miles said. Lena braced herself. "Okay." "That proposal, the one you made during the panic, the one I said to ask me again later." He turned to face her. "I've been thinking about it. A lot. And I realized something." "What's that?" "You were right. Not about the strategy part, but about the rest of it. About knowing what you want and going after it. About not waiting for the perfect moment, because perfect moments don't exist." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Lena's breath caught. "So I'm asking you, Lena Hart, will you marry me? Not as a legal maneuver, not as a solution to a problem. Just because I love you and I want to build a life with you and I can't imagine doing any of this without you." Lena looked at the ring, simple, elegant, exactly right, and felt tears spill over. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." Miles slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed on that small balcony while the city hummed below them. When they finally pulled apart, Lena was laughing and crying at the same time. "Emma's going to lose her mind," she said. "Emma already knows. I asked her permission 2 weeks ago." "You what?" "She's been helping me pick out rings. Keeping secrets is not her strong suit. I'm surprised she didn't spoil it." As if summoned by her name, Emma's voice called from inside. "Can I come out now? I heard everything, and I want to see the ring." They looked at each other and started laughing. Miles called back, "Come on then, you're part of this too." Emma burst onto the balcony in her pajamas, grabbed Lena's hand to examine the ring, and declared it scientifically perfect for your finger geometry. Then she hugged them both and announced she was going to be the flower girl, and also she had some ideas about the wedding ceremony involving LED lights and possibly a fog machine. "We'll discuss your ideas," Miles said diplomatically. "That's parent speak for no," Emma said. "But I'll wear you down. I'm very persistent." "I wonder where you get that from," Lena said, looking at Miles. "Definitely not from me," Miles said innocently. They went inside, and Emma insisted on staying up late discussing wedding plans until she fell asleep mid-sentence on the couch. Miles carried her to bed while Lena cleaned up the kitchen, and when he returned, he found her standing at the sink, staring at the ring on her finger with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. "No, just thinking about how different my life is from what I planned. I spent 36 years building walls, and then you came along and broke them all down." "I didn't break anything. You let me in. There's a difference." "Did I? Or did you just refuse to give up?" "Both, probably. We're a good team that way." Lena turned to face him. "I want to move in. Here, or we find a bigger place, but I want us to be together. Officially. All of us." Emma would love that. Fair warning, though, she's a terrible roommate. Leaves science experiments everywhere. Asks impossible questions at breakfast. Has no concept of indoor volume. Sounds perfect. They found a house 3 weeks later. Nothing ostentatious, just a comfortable 3-bedroom in a good school district with a yard big enough for Emma's outdoor experiments and a kitchen big enough for all of them to cook together. Lena paid cash, which made the whole process remarkably fast, and by the end of the month, they were moving in. Emma claimed the bedroom with the best natural light for her reading nook. Miles set up his workshop in the garage. Lena converted the smallest bedroom into a home office, though she found herself spending more time at the kitchen table, working alongside Emma's homework sessions. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in the backyard of their new house. Emma did not get her fog machine, but she did get to wear a dress she designed herself that incorporated scientifically accurate constellation patterns. Tommy from Miles's work stood as best man. Lena's assistant, she'd rehired Rebecca after realizing that having someone who anticipated her needs was a gift, not an invasion, served as maid of honor. Emma walked down the aisle first, scattering flower petals with the serious concentration she brought to everything. Then Lena, in a simple dress that cost less than most of her business suits, but felt more important than anything she'd ever worn. Miles waited for her at the makeshift altar, looking nervous and happy, and exactly right. The officiant asked if anyone objected to the union. Emma raised her hand. "Emma," Miles started, but she was already talking. "I object to the traditional family structure being the only one that counts. I object to people thinking love has to look a certain way. I object to anyone who thinks this family is weird or wrong or incomplete." She looked at Lena and Miles. "But I don't object to this wedding. This wedding is perfect." The guests laughed, and the officiant smiled. "Duly noted. Anyone else?" Silence. Good choice, Lena thought. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Miles promised to always come looking, to never leave her behind, to make terrible pancakes for the rest of their lives. Lena promised to let him in, to trust instead of control, to choose them every day even when it scared her. Then the officiant said something unexpected. "Emma Carter, would you like to say something to your parents?" Emma stepped forward, suddenly shy. "I wrote something. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay," Lena said. Emma pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I used to think families were something you were born into, that you didn't get to choose them, you just got what you got. But then my first mom left, and I thought I was broken. Like there was something wrong with me that made her not want to stay." Her voice wavered but held. Dad told me that wasn't true. He told me I was perfect, exactly as I was. And then Lena came, and she told me the same thing. And I realized that the best families aren't the ones you're born into. They're the ones you choose, the ones who show up, the ones who find you when you're lost and love you even when you mess up and never ever leave you behind. She looked up from her paper. So I choose you, both of you, as my parents, forever. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. Lena pulled Emma into a hug and Miles joined them, and the officiant had to clear her throat several times before she could continue. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss. Miles kissed Lena while Emma made exaggerated gagging sounds, and their guests cheered. Then Emma insisted on a group hug, and the three of them stood there together, officially a family in every way that mattered. The reception was perfect chaos. Emma explaining quantum physics to confused relatives, Miles's marine buddies telling embarrassing stories, Lena's business associates looking slightly uncomfortable in the casual backyard setting, but gamely eating barbecue and making small talk. Tommy gave a toast about how Miles had terrible taste in coffee, but excellent taste in women. Rebecca gave a toast about how Lena had finally learned that some things were more important than quarterly earnings. As the sun set and string lights came on and someone started a dance party on the lawn, Lena stood back and watched her new family. Emma was teaching Tommy's kids how to identify constellations. Miles was laughing with his old Marine buddies, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. People who'd come from separate parts of their lives were mingling, connecting, becoming part of something bigger. You okay? Miles appeared beside her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. More than okay. Perfect, actually. Yeah? Yeah. Lena took a glass, clinked it against his. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For seeing who I could be even when I couldn't see it myself. For breaking into a locked building on a hunch and changing my entire life. You make it sound dramatic. It was dramatic. It is dramatic. I almost died alone on a floor, convinced I didn't need anyone. And now I'm here, married to you, stepmom, to the most extraordinary kid on the planet, surrounded by people I care about. That's the definition of dramatic. Miles pulled her close. You know what I think? What? I think you were never as alone as you thought. You were just waiting for the right people to notice you were missing. Is that your way of saying you're my hero? I'm saying we're each other's heroes. You saved me just as much as I saved you. From what? From thinking that being strong meant never needing anyone. From thinking that love was something that happened to other people. From settling for less than what we deserved. Lena rested her head on his shoulder and watched Emma dance with abandon, watched their guests celebrate, watched the life they'd built together unfold in real time. 6 months ago, she'd been alone in an office, convinced that success meant isolation, that power meant control, that the only person she could count on was herself. She'd been so wrong about everything. The real power was in letting people in. The real success was in building something with others instead of alone. The real control was in choosing who you loved and how you showed up for them. Dad! Lena! Emma called from the dance floor. You have to come dance. It's your wedding. We should, Miles started. Absolutely. Lena set down her wine glass. They joined Emma on the lawn, and she grabbed both their hands, creating a small circle that quickly expanded as other guests joined in. The music was too loud, the dancing was uncoordinated, and Lena had never been happier in her entire life. This was her family, chosen, built, earned through showing up and staying present and being brave enough to need people. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. As they danced under the stars, Emma between them and the future wide open ahead, Lena thought about all the locked doors in her past, all the time she'd been left behind, forgotten, abandoned, all the years she'd spent making sure it could never happen again by never letting anyone close enough to matter. She'd been trying to solve the wrong problem. The answer wasn't to make herself invulnerable. It was to find people who would notice when she was missing, people who would come looking, people who would climb 42 flights of stairs, or search dark basements, or fight custody battles, or simply show up, day after day, choosing her the way she'd finally learned to choose them. I love you, she said to Miles and Emma both. We know, Emma said. We love you too. Obviously. Obviously, Miles echoed. pulling them both closer. They danced until Emma got tired, until guests started drifting home, until it was just the three of them cleaning up cups and decorations under the stars. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing each other deeply, from trust built through shared trials and daily ordinary moments. Later, after Emma had finally crashed in her new bedroom, surrounded by unpacked boxes and science equipment, Miles and Lena stood in the doorway and watched her sleep. "We did okay," Miles whispered. "We did better than okay. We did amazing. Think we can keep doing it? Day after day? Year after year?" Lena took his hand. "I think we can do anything as long as we do it together." They closed Emma's door and walked to their own room, to their new life, to the future they'd chosen to build together. And Lena realized that this ordinary, extraordinary moment was everything she'd been searching for without knowing it. She'd spent her whole life trying not to need saving, trying to be strong enough, smart enough, successful enough that she'd never be vulnerable again. Trying to prove that the girl locked in the basement was gone, replaced by a woman who controlled everything. But real strength wasn't about control. It was about connection. It was about letting people see you, all of you, and trusting them to stay anyway. It was about being brave enough to admit you needed help, and wise enough to accept it when it came. She'd needed saving that night on the 42nd floor, and Miles had saved her. But that hadn't been the end of the story. It had been the beginning. Because after the rescue came the choice to stay open, to stay vulnerable, to keep showing up even when it scared her. And she'd made that choice every single day. Some days it was easy, some days it was terrifying, but every day she chose them. And they chose her back. That was what family meant, not blood or law or traditional structures. Just people who noticed when you were missing and came to find you. People who held you when you broke and celebrated when you soared. People who saw all of you, the brilliant parts and the broken parts, and loved you anyway. As Lena fell asleep in Miles's arms, in the house they'd bought together, with their daughter sleeping safely down the hall, she thought about the woman she used to be. The one who'd worked through fire drills and measured her worth in acquisitions and believed that needing anyone was weakness. She hoped that woman would be proud of who she'd become. Someone who still worked hard but knew when to go home. Someone who still built empires but also built pancakes with people she loved. Someone who'd learned that the strongest thing you could do was admit you couldn't do everything alone. She hoped that woman would understand that she hadn't gotten weak, she'd gotten whole. And she hoped that somewhere there was another person like she used to be, successful and isolated and convinced they didn't need anyone, who would find their own Miles and Emma. Who would take the risk? Who would let someone in? Who would learn that being saved wasn't the end of your story? It was the beginning. Miles stirred beside her. "You thinking too loud again?" "Sorry." "Don't be." He kissed her forehead. "What about?" "How grateful I am. For you, for Emma, for all of this." "Me too. And how glad I am that you didn't trust the sensors that night, that you came looking even when everyone said the building was empty." "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Lena corrected. "Best was asking me to marry you." "Fair point." They lay there in comfortable silence until Miles's breathing evened out into sleep. But Lena stayed awake a little longer, savoring the moment. The quiet house, the ring on her finger, the family she'd never planned on having and couldn't imagine living without. She thought about all the people who were alone right now, working late in empty offices, convinced they didn't need anyone, building walls to keep out pain, but also keeping out love. She wished she could tell them what she'd learned, that being vulnerable wasn't weakness, that needing people wasn't failure, that the strongest, bravest thing you could do was let someone see you completely and trust them to stay. That rescue wasn't something to be ashamed of, it was something to be grateful for. And it went both ways. Miles had saved her, but she'd saved him too. Emma had saved them both just by being herself, by needing them, by showing them what family could be. They'd saved each other, and they kept saving each other every single day in small ways and big ones. That's what love was. Not a one-time rescue, but a continuous choice to show up, to stay present, to notice when someone was struggling and reach out your hand. Lena finally drifted towards sleep, peaceful and certain, and home in every sense of the word. Her last thought before dreams took her was simple but profound. No one would ever leave her behind again. Not because she'd made herself too powerful to abandon, but because she'd finally let herself be loved. And love, real love, chosen love, the kind built on showing up and staying present and refusing to give up, didn't leave people behind. Love noticed when you were missing. Love came looking. Love brought you home. And in the end, that was all anyone really needed. Not to be invulnerable, but to be seen. Not to be perfect, but to be chosen. Not to never need saving, but to know beyond doubt that when you did, someone would come. Someone would always come.